Let me just give you a rundown of the initial idea, the project, and what it's looking like now. So the initial goal was for phase one. So the idea of HS2 is that it starts in London and travels. Phase one would be they were going to build to Birmingham, and then phase 2A would be to Manchester, and 2B would be to Leeds.
Yeah.
Now, this is high-speed rail, but the high-speed trains would then be able to travel on the normal tracks that we have north of Manchester and Leeds to go up to Scotland. So I think a lot of people think of it as it's just connecting these places. It's not. It's just that the centre of the country is where we have a lot of logjam,
yeah,
traffic jams with trains. It's weird to think about traffic jams with trains, isn't it? So that phase one was supposed to be ready. What year?
2026.
2026, yes, this year. It's not. Spoiler alert. The entire railway was around 330 miles, and it was supposed to cost about £45 billion. Phase one is now not going to be ready until late 2030s, perhaps 2039. They've cut phase 2A, phase 2B, to be or not to be. So it is now only going to be about 140 miles.
Okay.
And it's going to cost £102 billion.
Somebody was saying it cost more than Artemis, the Artemis mission. Artemis? Around the moon.
I don't know, actually. Is that true? Yeah, it wouldn't surprise me. Yeah.
So it's more expensive to get to Birmingham than to get to the moon.
This is, I mean, it's really difficult to overstate how expensive this is. I mean, it is absolutely extortionate when you compare it to previous rail projects and rail projects elsewhere. How many miles of track have been laid so far?
30.
0.
None?
Yeah, 0.
Gosh, right, okay. Where was I the other day? I was driving somewhere the other day and there were roadworks, and it said that the reason for the roadworks was because of the preparations for HS2. Well, it would have been going to Bearded Theory in Derby.
Oh, right, okay, yeah. What's interesting is that you do see, a couple of times recently I've noticed, literally yesterday I was in a meeting at church and they were talking about there's a patch of land which the church owns, and they said, well, originally they were going to have to lose a bit of the land because it's near Piccadilly Station.
Ah, yeah.
And for the new revamped Piccadilly Station that was part of the HS2 line. And then I was in a civic society meeting here in Withington, and they were talking about the Christie Hospital, which is the specialist cancer hospital in South Manchester. And there's a section of that where they were saying that it needs to be kept just in case HS2 does come to Manchester. So it is, you do see the effects of it. So HS2, the idea then let's speak about the theory of it, because it's so easy for us to just throw the stats out there and say this is abysmal. But the idea of it was to take the crowded West Coast main line, which runs from London to Birmingham and then up past Manchester onto Scotland. That is incredibly crowded, particularly around a few choke points.
Yeah.
Now, this is where you have one track going in either direction, and you have on the track fast trains that are going from London Euston to Manchester Piccadilly, for example, or Birmingham or elsewhere. And you have commuter trains, slower stopping services, as well as freight trains.
Yeah.
Now, one might say, what does it look like when a track gets full? Do you literally have just trains lined up behind each other? Not quite, but it becomes incredibly complicated to navigate and to create a timetable that makes sure that these trains can pass each other. Now, there are a few sections of the track where there are 4 tracks, and trains can pass each other, but there are a couple of choke points. One of the choke points is between Birmingham and Manchester. So now that the line is not going to Manchester, it doesn't solve that problem. So we'll still need to solve that problem. That was the idea of it. Now, there was criticism early on because of the fact that countries with high-speed rail, places like France, Japan, their cities are much further apart from each other. So interestingly, Japanese. I think it's called the Shinkansen high-speed train. And that received...
Sounds too much like Wincanton, that, doesn't it?
Does
The haulage company.
I'm sure that's what it's called.
Okay.
But, that received quite a lot of criticism at the time in Japan. But it took a 4 or 5 hour car journey, and it can do it in 1.5 hours.
Okay.
Whereas something like London to Birmingham, it's not 4 or 5 hours in the car,
No.
and it's only knocking off 45 minutes off the train journey, something like that. So one of the myths about high speed rail in the UK is that it is purely to make journeys faster. It's not, and that would have just been a benefit of it. Now the problem is with something like Manchester now, it's not. It's going to make the journeys faster at all, really. The reason the HS2 team had to deal with the question of where do they go over hills? Do they go? Do they make tunnels? How are they going to buy land off people and businesses? And a few of the decisions early on have now caused the problems that we currently have, which was that they wanted to make it very environmentally friendly. A lot of the narrative driving HS2 was about reducing carbon emissions and about climate change. And they were quite proud of the fact that when it was running, it would run from day one as a carbon neutral transit system. Now, this means that...
Is it diesel? How's it? Is it electric?
Electric, yeah, electrified lines. I presume it's electric. Yeah.
I just didn't know.
I'm no train expert. I'd love to be, but no, the whole of the West Coast Main Line is electrified. So.
That's true already.
The countries that have done this elsewhere, Spain, France, Spain has done a really amazingly cheap high-speed rail network. They have a couple of comparative advantages. One is that Spain, and if anyone knows Spain very well, there are just miles and miles of nothingness.
Emptiness.
It really is. Like my parents live in Spain, and just behind their house, they call it the Campo, right? Where it's not like anybody owns it. You just kind of wander over this barren landscape. So that's obviously helpful for if you're trying to do a high-speed rail network. Also, that there is a much more standardized approach to compulsory land purchases, whereas in the UK, and there are a couple of instances where we have tried to maintain a certain level of local control. So local councils have taken HS2 to court on several occasions, and there's so many of these costs, things like court fees and stuff that you wouldn't necessarily associate with an infrastructure project initially.
Yeah.
I'll give you a couple of examples. One is with Whittington Heath Golf Club. There was a £400,000 land purchase required, and HS2 ended up spending £7 million on new development for the golf club. And the owner of the golf club apparently was delighted about that. Not surprised. One of the other issues is that they have these cost plus contracts, which is that when they take on a firm, they will pay the firm a percentage of the total value of that contract. So the firm is incentivized for there to be for the costs to overrun, because they end up getting paid more money at the end of the day. I think when you compare it to like the Moonshot project, for example, in the 60s, I believe there were caps on the amount that private businesses could make from their contracts.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah. I mean, there's two ways generally people approach a negotiation. One is trying to make it fixed fee, so all the risk is on the contractor. And the other, from the contractor side, is trying to make it cost plus, so all the risk is on the side of the person buying the service. And obviously, there's always tensions between those two.
Mm-hmm. Where are we? So
Whittington Golf Club,
Whittington
we've done.
Golf Club, yeah. And there are loads of examples of this. Of course, everybody points to the bat tunnel, where in order to protect a certain species of bat, they designed this quite audacious tunnel. But I think what I want to do with this segment, and the reason I'm bringing it up today, is I want to, and I hope that you and I, this is kind of what we try to do with this podcast, which is to, rather than just a polemic about HS2 bad because of this, is to say, why is that the case? How did we get here in the first place? Why are we incapable of building in this country of big infrastructure projects? And I think, as any keen listeners to the podcast might already guess, we often, and I would say, it comes down to a political solution. And a lot of people, a lot of the media and politicians want to put blame on this, on the certain lobby or something. But at the end of the day, it has to be about the vision of the politicians that are taking it to the people and saying, this is what we want to do. And that's where you'll get the breakthrough. I mean, why is it so expensive compared to how it was in the past? I mean, we are in Manchester, the first passenger railway station anywhere in the world was here in Manchester, Liverpool Street Station.
Yep.
Built, and that line was built in, it was opened in 1830. It was proposed, I think, around the mid-1820s. Took 5 years to build. It cost £1.2 million, which I think in today's money is about $1 billion.
I was going to say that would be a lot of money.
Yeah, a lot of money.
Terms, yeah.
And it's 35 miles long.
Okay.
So a lot of money for a short track, but it's still, I mean, it's a tiny amount of money compared to what we're spending on HS2. I mean, what's interesting is that if you work out the cost per mile and check for inflation, it seems to be about the same amount of money that Spain is spending on railways and France is spending on railways. 30, 40 million pounds a mile.
It was this one that was built in the 1800s.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, okay.
Whereas HS2,
yeah.
I mean, it's going to be 102 billion for 140 miles. So we're not too far off £1 billion for a mile, which is staggering, absolutely staggering. And whilst people might look back at the 1830 project and say, there were far fewer barriers then than we have now, there were also increased barriers, like the fact that this is the first time they've been doing it.
Yeah, technical challenges, yeah.
Massive technical challenges, in which we have all of the know-how and a lot of the technology now to be able to combat these things. So whilst they're not perfect comparisons, it does seem like when Britain was at its zenith and able to do these amazing things, it was spending far, far less money than it is today.
And I guess one of the reasons for that is that we talked before, haven't we, about what we need is a competent state, and we don't seem to be able to produce one of those. It does feel that part of what's lacking is kind of any political mandate for a government to do stuff, which then means that because it has no mandate, it's really easy for sectional interest to challenge it. And you have all those things like judicial review. You were saying people challenging decisions, and that's the thing that kind of really racks up costs.
Yeah, I mean, £3.9 billion was spent on buying up land and property, which is a massive overshot the estimates as well. So, yeah, at all aspects, when you think about planning, you think about court fees, you think about land and property, or every stage, the costs have been far greater than you might have thought. Where does the root of the problem lie? Well, Labour and the Conservatives both had this in their manifestos. So if you look at from a political angle and you say, well, where is the democratic consent? People would say, look back to a manifesto. But it shows the difficulty of that, because if we have a two-party system, which we had for a very long time, perhaps until just very recently, and you've got two parties and both of them have it in their manifesto, and you're voting for one party because of a certain reason that's nothing to do with HS2, then you can easily claim that, this had massive public support. The fact that at the 2017 general election, 80-something% of people, was it 80% voted for the Conservatives or Labour or something like that? It was the highest in a long time. And both parties supported it at the time. Whereas the opinion polling on HS2 is much lower. And those who strongly support it, very, very low. So there is an issue with that. Now, I think, because we're about solutions, I've got 3 ideas of why.
Hit me.
And if people would say, are you pro or against HS2? And if someone puts a gun to my head, I'll say massively pro.
Would you?
Yes. Because I like being contrarian.
Okay.
Because if it's a question, I mean, it's all gone wrong and it's been an absolute disaster.
Yeah.
It's a chance for us as a country to say, I mean, I think this is such a scandal. And as with a lot of the other scandals, it becomes apparent slowly.
Yes.
And slowly over the years. And you think, actually, what on earth's gone on here?
We'll spend another £10 billion investigating what went wrong, won't we?
Exactly right. So it's been absolutely abysmal. However, the moment we stop trying to do things like HS2 is the moment we just die as a country. And I'm much more worried about that. How can we solve these long term? One, integration. So this idea, I think, filters down into so many different areas of society. It's usually used when we're talking about immigration. HS2, the decision was to go underground for large parts of the journey. So I think the travel time from London to Birmingham was about 45 minutes, only 10 minutes of which would have been above ground.
Okay.
So they're massive tunnelling projects.
Yeah.
Tunnelling costs about 10 times that of normal track.
Okay.
Cuttings, which a lot of this is cuttings, 5 times.
Okay.
And if I think about train travel, of which I'm a massive proponent, one of the best things about train travel is looking out the window.
It is.
I love travelling along the West Coast Main Line down to London.
Yeah.
And I think of parts of the country that I don't stand out in my head as being the things you talk about to foreigners and say, oh, this is the best part of England. And yet so much of of the middle of the country is just gorgeous countryside. So I would be much more brazen about, no, we're going to put it overland and we're going to integrate it into the landscape. So things like viewing platforms.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
Why not? Show your kids HS2's, just down here. Let's have a look at a train coming past.
Okay.
Why not? And see a train travelling at 225 miles an hour.
Okay.
Another element to Heidi Alexander's ministerial statement was that the top speeds are going to be decreased from 225 miles an hour to 199 miles an hour. It's just that thing. We just can't do it anymore, can we? Another thing is vision. So a lot, and this ties into the third. These two are kind of mixed, which is democratic consent.
Yes.
So HS2 is one of those things that I barely heard of in its early stages. And we've got this the wrong way round. So much of the public dialogue about this is later on in projects that have gone wrong. It should have been right at the start. It should have, we should have welcomed the public's participation on what, they wanted to see with it.
Yeah.
And to have all of these conversations out before we even get to it.
Yeah. Yeah.
This links to vision because vision is so important. When you say to somebody, are you for or against HS2? And this is where the media landscape has got to as well. I remember this with when Sunak cut the Manchester leg. It was, and you might see when you go into a general election, it shows the parties where they differ on certain things. And one might be pro HS2, one might be against. But the one that's pro might be generally against big infrastructure projects, but they think, oh, we've already spent a lot of money. 40 billion has already gone into HS2.
Somebody was saying on the radio that it would cost us as much to stop doing it now as to finish it.
Yeah, so it would cost us a lot of money to stop. I don't think it would cost us as much as... We've spent about 40 billion. I don't think it's going to cost us 60 billion to stop. That would be crazy.
Okay.
But the cost benefit now becomes... You've got to weigh up the fact that we're only going to spend a 60 billion more.
Yeah.
How much benefit is there? The vision for this, I just think, was so limited. I mean, as much as there was a vision, it was connect London to the north so that the north can access all the benefits of London.
Yeah.
It's such SW1 thinking.
It is.
What are we trying to do with a big project like this? Are people aware of the fact that the West Coast Main Line is pretty much full? Are people aware of the fact that the price you're paying on tickets goes up because of the demand, right? So they raise the ticket prices so that there's not so much demand on that line, and it costs us a fortune to travel down south. These sorts of questions have to be part of that bigger vision of what do we want to see. And, you know, I would think a Britain that hopefully we're trying to advocate for and help build is one where you achieve amazing ambitions, like connecting all different parts of the country by rail. I want to show you a railway map of the country.
Okay.
I saw this week, and I sort of half knew what to expect, but it really shocked me. And I'll put it up so that people can see it. But I'll show you on my computer. So this was 196 years of passenger rail in Great Britain.
Okay.
And you'll see the stations sort of popping up in the 1800s, and how we had the densest railway network anywhere in the world. And then around the 1950s, 60s, you'll remember we've talked about beaching cuts.
We did, yeah.
On the podcast before.
Oh, gosh, they just disappear.
It just absolutely disappears. And I knew that would happen to a degree. I didn't know quite how much that would, how stark that would look on the map. All of the beaching cuts, I've become radicalised on this since we did that last podcast, where I just think, actually, no, it's a massive mistake. And so much of the country would benefit now from particularly light rail, so rail going from village to village, and small stopping services which connect all these parts of the country. That's I think that has to be part of the vision. I want to read you a quote from Paul Theroux, which I love.
Okay.
Paul Theroux is Louis Theroux's dad, and he wrote a book. He's a travel writer.
Yeah.
And he wrote a book called The Great Railway Bazaar, which I thoroughly recommend, and I'll put a link to it in the description. He said, in that book, he said, anything is possible on a train: a great meal, a binge, a visit from card players, an intrigue, a good night's sleep, and strangers' monologues framed like Russian short stories, which I just absolutely love. And if anyone's had the chance to do long distance railway travel, I think they'll know what I mean, which is it completely changed my outlook on traveling. And he says this in the book, and it resonates so much with me, where you get on the train. At one point he says, I found out it was only 12 hours to Lahore, and I was very upset because I wanted it to be longer.
Okay.
And I've done 18-hour, 20-hour train journeys, and the longer it is, the more enjoyable it becomes. So I think any vision for rail travel in the UK, firstly, it has to be all-encompassing. So it can't be just about one high-speed line from London to Birmingham. It has to be, how does that map onto things like Northern Powerhouse Rail, which we've talked about before? How does it map onto smaller train services between villages and towns? And sleeper trains.
Yes.
I want sleeper trains.
Yeah.
Right? I want...
Are we big enough, though, as a country for sleeper trains?
Yeah,
I know you
absolutely.
go from London to Scotland, but...
And what's the other sleeper train that we have?
I don't know.
London to Penzance.
Is it?
Yeah. So somewhere in the south to somewhere in the southwest.
How long does that take?
Is it 7.5 hours?
Is it?
Yeah.
Blimey. Okay.
If we're big enough to have a sleeper train from London to Penzance, we're absolutely big enough to have one from Birmingham to Inverness.
Yes.
Right? I want children that are growing up in Birmingham to be able to see what it's like in the Highlands of Scotland.
Yeah.
Why isn't that a great goal for us as a country? To connect all these different parts of our amazing country. It's only from travelling that I've come back to the UK and realised quite how magnificent it is.
Yeah.
I've learnt of something this week, motorail. You might know of this, but
I'm not sure I do.
It stopped before I was born in 1995, but it ran for about 40 years, where you could take your car onto the train.
Gosh, no.
You've never seen this?
No.
I'll have to show you a photo.
So this is, I mean, you can take your car on the cross-channel ferry, can't you? On the cross-channel
yeah.
Train. What do you call it? Eurotunnel.
So motorrail, literally you'd have cars all lined up on the trains.
So that does look like a ferry, doesn't it? Like when you drive onto a ferry.
Yeah.
It's like that, driving onto a train.
And perhaps it's too nostalgic to bring something like that back. And one of the arguments of why it died out was that cars became more reliable, so you could drive long distances across the country. And you didn't. This was partly to get people to seaside towns, so then they could have their cars to travel around.
Yeah.
But it's just another example of something that we did that I didn't know about. I thought that was really cool.